What's up, guys? Brett Appley here from DailyFanMMA.com, back with another UFC Quick Picks for UFC Vegas 29, which is the Korean Zombie versus Dan Ige. Should be a fun card. It's actually not my favorite slate in the world. I mean, we're coming off a huge UFC 263. We got UFC 264, I believe, with McGregor-Poirier coming up July 10th. So this is kind of just a filler slate. But as usual, going to give you my favorite cash game play, tournament play, salary play, and my fade of the week. Before we get into that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, guys. Like the video. Comment below who your favorite DraftKings play of the week is. Always interested in reading those comments. And thank you for the support. I mean, there's so much great content, as always, here on the Mayo Media Network, and not just with the quick picks. For MMA, we have the Dogger Pass podcast with Paul Shaughnessy, Cody Saftik. Mad Lab's got his MMA main event breakdown and so much other good stuff. I've been watching all the Euros content this past several days. Just an excellent platform, and thanks to Pat and his team for having me on again. Let's get into it. My favorite cash game play this week is going to be Sergey Spivak at 9.2K. All right, so I already mentioned it at the start, but it's a very awkward slate. I mean, the level of talent top to bottom on this card is just it's pretty low, and there aren't many spots that I'm excited to pay up for. I do think Spivak is a pretty strong play in cash games, though generally he's not a fighter I would ever want to target. But he's 9.2K against Alexei Oleinik, and he's one of the biggest favorites on the slate at minus 230. He also has the biggest inside distance line on the slate by far at minus 150 in a fight that is minus 550 to end inside the distance. And Spivak's not a great talent, but he can strike a little bit. He's landed 3.7 takedowns per 15 minutes, and Alexei Oleinik is, north of 40 years old. He's coming off another knockout loss, this time to Chris Daukaus in the first round. He's not the most durable. He's experienced and he's tricky, and maybe he can catch Spivak in an Ezekiel choke, but outside of that, I don't see him having a ton of success here. And again, if you're trying to pay up, I mean, there's so many risks. Bruno Silva, 8.8K risk. Parisian, 8.7 risk. Chaos Williams risk. Diego Lima risk. And so if you're paying to the very top, it's Alexa Kamur, who's not a strong talent but facing weak competition, Sergey Spivak, or Marlon Vera fighting Davy Grant, and Marlon Vera has already lost that fight. So there aren't as many obvious cash game plays on this slate as usual. However, I do think Spivak is a strong target, and I think he's going to be pretty popular in cash. Other inside distance lines in this range, Kamur's north of plus 200, and I think Vera's around plus 170 or so. So minus 150 inside the distance for Spivak is really good as a fighter who has a grappling, path to victory. And he's coming off 2 wins in a row. He scored 132 against Jared Vanderaa, 101 against Carlos Felipe, and his other win, 120 against Tai Tuivasa. So he scores very well and wins. A big favorite, so you're getting safety in that sense, and he still has high upside with his inside the distance line. The way I would kind of play this is in tournaments, I think you'll have an opportunity to go the other way a little bit if you want. Because the fight is minus 550 to end inside the distance, far and away the most likely fight to end inside the distance on the entire slate, and Oleinik is priced very cheaply at 7K, so he's going to be a little bit of a leverage target in tournaments in that sense, and if Oleinik wins, it's probably by early submission, and he's going to end up on the optimal lineup. So maybe you can consider being heavy on this fight in tournaments, maybe being a little bit overweight to the field on Oleinik in tournaments as well. But I think Spivak's going to be the more popular play. Spivak is the better play, and certainly for cash games at 9.2K, he is my play there of the week. All right, let's move on to tournaments. And I'm going to give out Lara Procopio at 8.5K. She's fighting Casey O'Neill. And Procopio isn't a great talent either. However, she's fought twice in the UFC, and she's had 2 pretty solid offensive production performances. In her UFC debut, she lost to Carol Hossa, but she landed 165 significant strikes in 3 rounds. And in her most recent fight she beat Molly McCann and landed 7 takedowns. So she fights at a pretty high pace. She's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, capable of wrestling against weaker opponents. And if she's forced to stand and trade, we know she has the volume in her back pocket. And I think she's a better grappler than Casey O'Neill. O'Neill is very young and inexperienced and maybe a solid prospect. O'Neill might have a physicality advantage here. But I don't see, O'Neill's coming off a win against Shauna Dobson in which she took her down and beat her up. I don't really see that path to victory being there for O'Neill in this matchup because Procopio is a better submission grappler. I do think there's going to be ground exchanges, so I do think the winner of this fight scores pretty well. But like I said, Procopio has takedown upside, and she has volume upside, and she's 8.5K, minus 150 favorite, fairly safe. I don't think she's likely to get finished. And I think in a win, she's pretty likely to exceed at least 10x. I'm not sure about 100 points. She might need more of a ceiling performance to get that done. But, grappling scores so well. And in that fight against McCann, Procopio put up 110 points in a decision. So it's she controlled the fight for nearly 13 minutes. It's certainly in her wheelhouse here. I think O'Neill's going to want the fight on the mat. And against Carol Hossa in a loss, she put up 67 points. If she had gotten the decision win, that would have been 97. So for 8.5K, she's one of the few non-knockout or bust fighters in this range. I'm willing to take a chance on her. I think she's got a pretty good floor, multiple paths to victory, including grappling, which we like, against a theoretical weaker grappler. And at 8.5K there, she is going to be my tournament play of the week. All right, let's move on to my salary play of the week. I'm going to go with Wellington Turman at 7.4K. Turman is the underdog here, taking on newcomer Bruno Silva, not the flyweight Bruno Silva. This is middleweight. And Silva is 19-6 professionally. He most recently won the M1 championship, which is a pretty solid regional organization, in Russia. But that was in 2018. And he tested positive for some anabolic steroid after that fight when the UFC tried to bring him in. He was given a 2-year suspension from USADA. So Silva has not fought since 2018, and he's coming off a multi-year steroid-based suspension. And I don't really buy into him. He has some knockout upside, so I don't hate him. He's got 16 of his 19 career wins by knockout, and perhaps he can win by knockout here. Turman is coming off a loss by knockout to Andrew Sanchez, so there's definitely a question in that sense. However, Silva in his losses hasn't looked great. 5 of his 6 pro losses have come by submission. I've seen him taken down many times on the regional scene. I've seen him give up his back many times. And Turman's a pretty solid wrestler and grappler. And in the UFC, he's already had some success. He landed 2 takedowns against Marcus Perez and 4 takedowns against Carl Roberson. He's a good submission grappler. He likes to take the back, so I think that path to victory is going to be there for him. In his loss against Andrew Sanchez, Andrew Sanchez is a national champion collegiate wrestler, and that made Turman's path to victory more difficult. But against a weaker grappler in Silva, who's going to want to keep the fight standing, I think the takedowns can come for Turman, especially if this fight gets extended. I really don't trust Silva on the ground. And also, I'm not convinced that Silva is, I think there's a chance that he's fraudulent, so to speak. So there, maybe his success did come in large part because he was fighting in Russia, juiced up on steroids, and now after this long layoff, I'm not certain that he's going to come in his best form. There's a lot of narrative there, but Turman's only 7.4K, so it's not like a huge risk. If Silva wins, so be it. But Turman is 7.4K as a plus 115 underdog with submission upside. He's only plus 260 inside the distance, but Silva's never lost by decision. So if Turman wins this fight at all, I think it comes from takedowns to some degree. I think he has very high upside. I think he's very, very likely to exceed value in any sort of win and a good chance to be on the optimal lineup. So strong value play there with grappling upside and a narrative. I like Turman as my salary play of the week at 7.4K. Okay, moving on to my fade of the week. To be completely honest, if you told me that you wanted to fade any fighter like north of 8.5K, I would think that was fine because, we mentioned Spivak as a standout with its inside the distance line. I think it makes sense to get exposure to that fight as a whole, but there's a lot of red flags with every single fighter in this range, and a lot of them are finish or bust. So I'm just going to give you a fighter who I think is not as likely to smash as the others, and that's Diego Lima at 9K against Matt Brown. And look, Matt Brown has been hurt a lot, and he's been hurt to the body a lot. He's been hurt to the chin a lot, and he can be taken down. So Lima has just as much upside as every other fighter, but he doesn't really push a pace. And that's a big concern of mine. He's minus 170 against Matt Brown, but let me pull up his numbers here. Lima only lands 3.14 significant strikes per minute. He's absorbing 3.93, and he lands 1.3 takedowns per 15 minutes. So, he's coming off a loss in which he landed 69 strikes and 0 takedowns. Prior to that, he landed 32 strikes in a decision and 2 takedowns against a very weak opponent. Prior to that, he won a decision and landed 65 strikes. Like, he could hurt Matt Brown, but I'm more interested in fighters who are going to hunt for the knockout and hunt for takedowns and submissions. And I kind of think Lima's just going to do whatever Matt Brown wants. Back himself up to the cage, throw a few strikes here and there, maybe get a takedown, hold top position. I think his floor is pretty reasonable in a win, but I'm not as convinced that he's just going to blow Brown out of the water. He's plus 260 inside the distance, which is not a great line for 9K. Like I said, I could see him winning by knockout, so you can play him. It's just I'd probably rather take a shot on Spivak. Commerce facing a really bad opponent. Marlon Vera, Davey Grant's been knocked down a bunch of times, so I think he's viable. Chaos Williams has a very good inside distance line. There's arguments for Bruno Silva and Parisian, so Lima falls lower on the priority list for me. He doesn't push enough pace, which means he's not going to get there with volume. He's only landed 2 takedowns in his last 8 fights combined. So, yeah, maybe he gets 2 takedowns here, but I just don't think that's going to be enough to smash either. In that last decision win, he scored 61 total points with 2 takedowns. So I really do think he needs an early knockout. And as much as it's theoretically possible with Matt Brown, I don't have enough conviction in him to play him over the other fighters in this range. And therefore, he's going to be my fade of the week. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week's UFC Quick Picks. Thank you for the support again. I know it's not the best slate in the world, but there's still some big prizes on DraftKings and across the industry. So good luck in your contest this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Appley, @TTPP, dailyfanmma.com for all your DraftKings breakdowns needs. And we did write up every single fight on the slate. As always, got a podcast, rankings, projections, all that good stuff. So check it out if you are interested in the more in-depth analysis. Thanks again to Pat for having me on the channel. Make sure you subscribe and like the content. And until then, we'll talk to you soon. Peace.